Welcome. We're glad you're here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all as you come in. I do appreciate you going to the chat box and putting your roller position there so I know who my audience is for this afternoon. I'm Jamie Ward with Curricula Concepts. I'm in Arkansas, so I think we've got folks from all over the state. So it's great to be able to come together virtually here this afternoon. We have Mati on with us. So if you want to give a little wave so they can see who you are. He's going to help with taking some notes and helping in the chat box and any other thing we need, right? Yes, but we're super glad you're here to help. So this afternoon, we are going to spend some time talking about engaging families in meaningful ways in early childhood education, early care and education. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about, well, let's see, there we go. A little bit about what we're doing here in Arkansas, and then a new project that we're working on with the Hope team. And then you are going to get to experience sort of a demo of a Hope Informed Cafe, at least pieces of it. So I'm very glad you're all here. For this first few minutes, I'm just going to share some information, and then you all are going to have lots of time to interact. So I'm excited about that part. We will talk about just the foundation of family engagement, which I'm sure you all are keenly aware of. I'll briefly go over that, talk about an effective strategy, which is the cafe model, some challenges around family engagement, and then again, explore and participate in a cafe. So just a little bit about sort of how I came to this work and family engagement and well-being of families. We at Curricula Concepts have been around for about 8 years. I've been in early care and education for my whole career, so 25 plus years now. But our focus really is on making connections and building relationships. That is at the core of everything that we do, whether we're working with the early care and education workforce, or we're working with families, or whomever it is. We have been delivering cafes for a number of years now as a strategy to engage families. And we have used, some of you may be familiar with the 0 to 3 caring conversation cafe model. We've used that for a number of years here, and I actually loved it so much that several years ago was brought on by 0 to 3 as a consultant, and have gone different places to teach other people how to use it because I think it's such an impactful model. So a lot of our work is heavily influenced on the structure that was created by 0 to 3 and others. And now, as I mentioned, we are working with the Hope team to develop out some additional cafes using that structure with content related to another project that we're working on that I will share very soon. So to kick us off and sort of get us in this mindset of thinking about engaging families, I want you to think for a minute about your own personal experiences of a time when your parents or your family members were involved in your child care years, if you can remember back that far. I know I can't, or your school life. So think about a memory that of your family members being connected to your school in some way. But we also, some of us did not have families who were very involved or engaged in our early years, or maybe you did but had a friend who was not. We certainly don't want to frame that in terms of parents being good parents or bad parents. We just want to focus on, and we'll be talking about some situations that make it very difficult or challenging for parents to be involved, and some of the things that we can do to overcome some of those things. So let's see if our technology is going to work. Good. So who are we talking about when we say families? When I say the word parents, really for the rest of our session, I'm referring to everyone on this list. We know that young children care about any adult who provides care and love. And it's important to think about, or to think in broader terms than just parents. So we try to be very sensitive to that in our work, and use the word families. We've really replaced the word parents with families because it is such a, there are so many other people that are considered family. We always say a family is whatever a family says it is, right? If I say my family is who lives in my home and my neighbors, then that's who my family is. And we value and respect that as we work with child care providers and families. Families certainly are stressed, stretched, and struggling. We saw that before the pandemic, let's face it, as we worked with early care and education providers across the state. This defined many of their families, and many of the child care programs that we worked with were actively looking for ways to, relieve some of that stress and to really be a hub for families to get resources and support. And so that's where our group has been able to come in and work with them to sort of reimagine what family engagement looks like. So for many years, the education community, not just early childhood, but education community as a whole, used the phrase parent involvement. However, over the last few years, family engagement seems to be the buzzword now. Who knows when we'll go back the other way? That tends to happen, but family engagement certainly has begun to emerge over the last few years. Partially, I think, because we have better recognition that other people besides parents are a child's family, but also because we recognize how important it is for the whole family really to be engaged in a child's education. So we're going to look just a minute at the difference, what we think the difference between involvement and engagement is. So with involvement, we're talking about, talking to families. Sorry, I've got too many things open on my screen here, and my mouse is not wanting to work. That's okay. When we think about involvement, what we've thought about, I should say first, and I tell early care and educators this all the time, neither one is, involvement is not bad. So we're not, definitely not downplaying programs who are involving parents in these ways, but we're wanting to move toward this more transformative practice of engagement. When we think about involvement, we're talking about things that families show up to a program to do, right? So we certainly can talk to families that pick up and drop off about what their children ate or how many diapers were changed or whatever it might be. At the next level of being involved, parents would probably attend events or meetings or open houses, art fairs, those kinds of things. And maybe then the teacher would start to get interested in a family's life outside of the program and ask some probing questions. But if we stop here at just involvement, we're making assumptions about families, and they're making assumptions about their early care and education providers too. You may be familiar with Dr. Donna Beagle from Communication Across Barriers, but I've heard her tell a story before about her earliest years in school and about her mom. They lived in generational poverty. Her mom never went to her school, but it was because she didn't feel welcome at school. She didn't have a good experience herself in her early years or in high school, and that's just not a place she wanted to be. So she didn't go to all the events. She didn't show up to help out. And in her experience, educators perceived her mom as a parent who didn't care about her child, right? We make those assumptions when in fact, her mother was absolutely very involved in her life and cared very much for her child. So this becomes a problem when we make these assumptions either way, as we all know, because we're all trying to raise the same child. So we need to be on the same page. So by choosing to work independently of the family, we're not promoting family well-being and strong parent-child relationships and healthy child development and all those things that we want to promote. And we aren't likely to see that outcome that's so important to early care and educators, such as better social skills and fewer troubled behaviors. So we have to build those relationships to get those outcomes. So advancing from involvement to engagement, Means doing things like working together to design activities that reflect a family's culture and values and traditions, and discussing and implementing a learning plan for children that applies to time in the program and time at home. And of course, building the social connections that we know are so important that will impact both the child and family. So I like to say, I actually got this from Larry Falazzo, if you follow him or ever followed any of his work. Involvement's leading with our mouths, and engagement is leading with our ears. So, what is family engagement? This is the definition that we like, the definition that we use. It's building genuine relationships that promote family well being, strong parent child relationships, and children's healthy development. And we believe in our work that early care and education and the providers that serve very young children is the place to start with family engagement. It lays that foundation for the family to be engaged throughout the child's entire school career. Some of the principles of effective family engagement are that teachers and programs engage families in two-way communication. So that's very important. Ways that are truly reciprocal. So we talk a lot with programs who like to talk about the things that they do, like sending out newsletters and weekly emails and things like that, which are all, again, very good ways of involving parents. But to engage them, how are you then asking for feedback from those families on whatever it is that you're sharing? Providing learning activities for the home and in the community is important. Inviting families to participate in decision making and goal setting for their child. So, really valuing the parent or the family as the child's first teacher. And inviting families to participate in program level decisions and wider advocacy efforts to build and empower parents and family members to participate and advocate for early care and education and for their own child, in a positive way. And then to implement for programs, early care and education programs, to implement a comprehensive program level system of family engagement. So we work with programs to think about how to develop a system of family engagement and not just individual things that they do. Like I don't know if this is these are things across the country, but here we have a lot of muffins for moms and donuts for dads events that early care and education programs have, which are very good. But what we and a lot of fun, but we encourage programs to think about family engagement in a bigger, broader way, and really a deeper way. So that brings us to the cafe model, which is one method that we use to meaningfully engage families and to work with early care and education providers to implement in their programs in a way that will enable them to really dig deeper into developing relationships with the families in their program. You can see some of the things on the screen there that are benefits of the cafe. You're going to also get to practice here in just a minute, or experience one if you haven't before. But they really do promote conversations with parents and providers. That strengthening families' protective factors are embedded into the cafes. We'll talk a little bit about that. And I love that last one. It taps into the collective wisdom that's in every community. We say at every cafe, everyone's an expert in their own experiences, and a cafe is a place to share those experiences. Here are some of the benefits of the cafe model, and I can tell you story after story of the benefits that we've seen play out. As I mentioned earlier, what we do is heavily influenced by the 0 to 3 model. And part of that model, really the heart of that model, I think, is that they're not just family cafes, but they also include staff, which allows for the staff and family members to really develop the relationships we want them to develop. And so it's relationship based, it's strength based when we think about the protective factors that are aligned, and we'll talk about those in a sec. Um, this ecological view or perspective that offers, Reverend Armstrong spoke earlier about a child existing within a family, family existing within a community, and then onto that broader scale. And the cafe model, that's certainly a benefit of the cafe model for folks to have that perspective. They're family centered and they're certainly reflective. So the 0 to 3 model that we've used, the cafes that they've developed are certainly all aligned with strengthening families, protective and promotive factors. And any cafes that we've designed, custom cafes we've designed, and those that we are doing alongside the Hope team, also will be aligned to the strengthening families factors. So in the chat box, let's just do an impromptu poll here, so I'll know how to proceed. From 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, give me an idea of your level of understanding of the protective and promotive factors. Some 3s, some 5s, some 4s. So folks are pretty familiar, some of you very familiar. So I will just briefly share these just for context for what we're going to talk about next then. Thank you for that. So we know that protective means these conditions that mitigate or eliminate risk, and promotive means that they're conditions that actively enhance well-being. So as we look at these quickly, let's think about each of those. So knowledge of parenting and child development. Does the parent or caregiver have a basic understanding of how a child develops? Do they understand milestones? Do they understand, do they have some parenting skills and strategies for guiding behavior? Do they understand when it's appropriate for a child to begin to make choices, or appropriate for them? Conversation I had with a dad recently about when their child should start practicing tying their shoes. That was something that was very important to him. It's very important that parents understand when those things should happen. And if they do, that certainly is going to enhance the well-being of their family if they have that understanding and don't have expectations that exceed where a child should be. Parental resilience. We've talked a lot about this morning, but just as a reminder here, is one of the protective and promotive factors. I like to say that parental resilience means we bounce back better, right? So families have the ability to go through something difficult and challenging, to recover and to grow and bounce back in a better and stronger way. Many adults that we know, people that we know, sort of have this innate skill to be able to do this. They suffer great loss or go through hard things and just are able, through their own life experiences, to bounce back, to learn from, and to grow from that. While others need lots of support and guidance to be able to develop this skill in a way that provides support to their family. Social connections, we like to say this is the magic sauce. We know that relationships matter. Social connections are the opposite of isolation. We know what isolation does to families and to people in general. We've seen that a lot over this past year, as was talked about some this morning. And there is, I don't think, anything that is more important than social connections when it comes to being a strong family. We've got to have those people that we can reach out to and talk to and listen to and trust and get support from. And we've seen over this last year, especially, how important those social connections are. And then concrete support in times of need. We all know just what it says. When you're experiencing trouble or difficulty, do you know who to look out for help, whether it's formal or informal? We talk with families and early care and education providers about this a lot. Sometimes the families that we work with, I say Rolodex, and nobody knows well, most people don't know what that means anymore. So your contact list in your phone, like, is it longer than the families that you work with? Because if it is, you probably have way more connections and can, I always say you don't have to know all the answers, but you can make sure that families know that you're the person who can find the answers. And that's what's really important. And if we can empower families as well to have those skills, that will help make their family more successful too. And then the last one, which is the only promotive and protective factor explicitly about the child, um, social and emotional competence of children. So, do the children in the family have the ability to interact positively with others, self regulate, communicate, and do all those things that we're teaching young children to do at a very young age? Um, if not, we know that can cause challenges and stress for the family as a whole. So, as I said, we use those protective factors to align with the content of the cafes. And this new project that we are working on, that they've asked me to share about this afternoon, with Nemours and the Hope team that you've heard from this morning, is to design cafes um, for families who are participating in a project focused on health and well-being. So we're focused on physical activity, nutrition, breastfeeding support, and screen time. So we are going to be developing cafes for families so that they are getting some of the information that the staff of the early care and education programs are receiving. And the cafes are going to, or excuse me, the Hope building blocks are going to be incorporated into the cafes. And so we're really excited about that. And I'll share a little bit about those. So I know Dr. Bob went over the Hope building blocks, of course, early this morning. But just as sort of a reminder, the building blocks really are all focused on the needs of the child. And we know that the relationships within the family, the relationships that children have with people outside of their family, and the relationships that from other adults, so other adults who show interest in them, and the relationships that they have, the healthy relationships they have with their peers, are very important. The environments that they have to grow and learn in, from their own home where their basic needs are met, to where they are able to feel emotionally secure wherever they live, a stable school environment where they're able to feel valued and receive that good quality education, and then community. So again, that through that ecological lens, we look at environment and engagement. Um, are children able to be a part of projects and community service and things within their school, no matter how young they are? Religious organizations, are they able to partake in family cultural traditions, or in organized extracurricular activities like music or art or those kinds of things? Children need to feel connected to their communities, to something bigger than they are, and to feel loved and appreciated. And then social emotional development. Children need opportunities to practice that. We heard that some this morning. To practice that self-awareness, to practice self-regulating their emotions and their behaviors, to get this to gather the skills that they need to be able to communicate well. And where do they get opportunity to do this most? But through child initiated play. And they need to have the opportunities in their child care settings and in their homes to be able to participate in that child-centered play, so that they can pick up those skills. That comes easy for some children, we know, and then most, I would say, children, because those are learned skills, need adults to guide and scaffold and support them. So we are working on using the protective and promotive factors to support these 4 building blocks of hope. We're looking at ways to thinking about ways that they do support each other. So, for instance, we talk about social connections. If parents have strong social connections, which we're trying to build in the cafes, that models for the child how to have those relationships with their peers and others around them. Also, we think if parents have strong social connections, then it's more likely that a child will have adults outside of their family, which we know is important, that take a genuine interest in them. So if we want these positive childhood experience, then we believe we need to start with the families. I think that was talked about this morning as well. So when we think about incorporating these into cafes, um, as I think about sort of the structure of the cafe, again, the social connections that we encourage for those healthy, positive relationships, a safe environment is set up so that the adults who are participating feel like they can share and that they're valued. I'll share a quick story here. I did a cafe several years ago, a couple years ago, I guess, with a child care program, and we do a partner activity at the beginning. And the partner activity that day was for each partner they had a blank piece of paper and some markers, and they were to draw a feeling that they had experienced within the last couple of weeks. Could be positive or negative, whichever they wanted. And then they exchanged the papers, and each partner was to try to, they couldn't use any words on their paper, of course, and each partner was to try to guess the feeling. So there was a grandmother there who was taking care of um, young children. She had young children living with her and was taking care of them. So she was there that night participating. And I walked around and saw that on her piece of paper, she had taken a gray marker and she just drew a square with the gray marker. And so this is very early on in the cafe. And, we haven't really forged any kind of relationships at this point. And so I just kind of said to her, "That's interesting. I'm gonna want to hear a little more about that when you're comfortable sharing." And she didn't. She just kind of nodded her head, and I went on. And by the end of the cafe, which I should have said, and those of you who deliver cafes are very aware that each piece of the cafe is very intentional to begin to get people to open up and feel comfortable and safe to share. And so by the end, after we'd worked through all these pieces, this grandmother sort of raised her hand and she said, "I think I want to share what's on my piece of paper and from earlier." And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And so she held up her piece of paper to those who hadn't seen it, and she said, "This is how I feel. I feel like I'm in this box and I'm completely isolated and I have nobody to help me, and I'm getting no support until I came here tonight, and now I sort of feel like I've been in therapy for a while." um, and it's these kind of safe environments that allow people to feel comfortable to share, that also allow, by having staff from their child care center participate, them to see these families in a different light, to get to know them a little bit better, and then to know what families actually need. So we're very well intentioned in what we try to provide to families, especially in childcare settings. We're great at having those parent resource centers set up, or bulletin boards, or offering trainings, whatever it might be. But the cafes and these real intentional conversations allow childcare staff, directors, and so on to then say, "Wow, you know, what I was offering was well intentioned. I still think it's important, but what I'm hearing now is that we need to offer this or that, or provide this or that, whatever that might be," that come from those conversations that you just can't have when you're having conversations just to drop off and pick up. Um, so that's one example of just a safe environment and having that set up in such a way that they feel comfortable to share. Having a level of engagement that allows for folks to begin to feel that sense of "I matter" and that sense of belonging. The opportunities for social and emotional development that come from a cafe, and sort of that the way that I see us incorporating and aligning there, is that in a cafe where we go in as a facilitator, as you all know, um, to facilitate these conversations, also some indirect teaching of skills can happen. So the parent the dad who was questioning me about how old a child should be before he allows them to make choices, I was able to have some conversation and to sort of indirectly teach some skills to him that had him leaving thinking, okay, maybe I'll try that, maybe I'll give that a shot. So that's going to then give his child some opportunities that maybe she wouldn't have had before. So we are going to experience a modified version of Cafe and to hear from you here in just a sec. Um, I wanted to mention here this safe environment that we do create. We do spend some time at the beginning of each cafe talking about active listening, what it is, what it looks like. We again set the space up as a judgment-free zone, a safe space, sort of what happens in a cafe stays in a cafe kind of mindset. And then we always ask participants, if there are things that they want to add to make the space conducive to conversations. We do talk about sharing the air. That's really important as we sort of set the stage for how the conversations are going to take place. So, say your piece, share the air, give somebody else a chance to say what they'd like to say. So the structure of a cafe, just to give you an idea, if any of you, if you have not implemented one before, we do have a planning meeting before the cafe with early care and education providers. We ask that stakeholders, including a parent representative, is there, and we just determine all those really kind of the logistical things: when, where, how are we going to advertise, and we determine the topic there. So we by no means go into an early care and education program and say this is the topic that you're going to do. We say these are the topics that we offer, and they choose what they want to do, and that's what we do with their families. Um, the setup is very important for these events. What kind of, the ideal situation is that you would have round tables that folks could sit around and everybody could see each other. But we think about what's available, what do we have, and how we can use that to set it up in a way that's comfortable for people. We provide decorations for the middles of the table, and of course food, all the things you need to do to get them to come. Childcare, we have table hosts, which are generally staff members who are at each table, or when, as we've been doing it virtually over the last year, in each breakout room, to sort of keep the conversation going. So, ask, say, tell me more about that, or kick off the conversation if it doesn't kick off right away. Generally, once the kickoff happens, there's no stopping them. But that is part of that. And then you can see there sort of an example of how a cafe would flow with an introduction. We do a brief review of the protective factors. We'll be doing a review of the hope building blocks and sort of what's applicable for that session for them. We do have some content there. And then we really get into the meat of it with the cafe's questions or conversations, and end with a reflection and reminder memos that I'll tell you more about. So I did want to mention on that planning meeting, we again have a parent representative come, and at one I did before the pandemic, in the northwest part of our state, we had a mom who was participating in the planning meeting, and she said to me, there's no way I'm going to get my husband to come to this. I really wish he would, but there's no way that I'm going to get him to come. And I said, well, she said something about, I can never get him to come and we do crafts or something. And I said, well, I don't think I would come if we were doing crafts. I'm not really a crafty person. But maybe tell him that this is, we're going to have dinner and this is going to be just conversation with other adults. So the night of the event, she walked in with him behind her with his arms folded, if you can see me. I don't know if you can, but his arms were folded. Clearly, he was not open to conversation or even being there that night, but he obviously was drugged there. and sat like that most of the night. When we got to time to do our conversation questions, there's generally 3 questions, and you start at a table and get up, rotate, mix up, and go to the next. And the first time we moved, he stayed right with her. He didn't separate. Second time, he went to a different table than she did, which I thought, wow, that's progress. You could see his shoulders sort of beginning to relax a little bit. He started talking a little bit. So at the end, when we did the reflection or the harvest, I asked a couple of really simple questions. So, how did it feel for you to be able to share your experiences with others? And then, how do you feel? How did it feel to be able to hear the experiences from the people here tonight? And so, as you all know, as professionals, you ask that question and you give it a little wait time. And I did that, and slowly but surely, his hand began to raise from the very back of the room. And I called on him, and he said, I did not want to come tonight. I absolutely did not want to be here. He said, but I'm so glad I did. And that really, like, I could tell you story after story of parents and families who come to these cafes and say, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know someone else was struggling with this. And I know you all hear that in your work as I saw what you do and when you came into the session today. But this is such an impactful strategy for early care and education providers, childcare centers who are so busy and overwhelmed. And many times family engagement, oh my goodness, just thundered, I'm sorry. Many times family engagement is low on their list, quite honestly, because they are trying to do everything they have to do to keep children taken care of, right, during the day, and all the things they need to do with children, and they just think families are not a priority to me. But as soon as we begin to demonstrate this process and they buy into it, I mean, I can't think of a single circumstance where they have not been absolutely sold and have been able to see how these relationships impact what they do, and impact the children in such a positive way. So we're really excited to be moving into this project with the Hope team and the folks at Nemours. We are working on developing our first cafe, which is focused on, it's actually focused on resilience, and what and experiences throughout this past year. And so that's actually in development now, and we'll be rolling that out in the next month or so. But for today, I wanted to take some time. Um, our folks who put together this summit today wanted you all to have plenty of time to talk and share your experiences. So I am going to get to stop here, and we are going to do a demo of a cafe so that we can hear from you. So the first thing we're going to do is a partner activity. And I am going to put you guys into breakout rooms. And when you get in your breakout room, we're just going to spend 4 minutes here. So each person's going to get 2 minutes to talk. And I want you to think about how you feel when you're with your go-to person. So that person that when the best thing in the world happens to you, you pick up the phone, or when the worst thing in the world happens to you, you pick up the phone. How do you feel? So you don't have to necessarily say who it is if you don't want to, but just how do you feel when you're with that person? And then what do they specifically do that helps you feel that way? Okay, so as you probably could tell by the partner activity, this is after the introduction, and we've already gone through content and all this with participants. This is the first place where we ask them to share with just one other person to begin sort of breaking down those walls, especially if they don't know each other quite yet. And so we only pair them with one person, and we ask a question that everyone can answer. So we never would say, like, tell us the top 3 goals you have in your life, or whatever it is. I mean, we even sometimes just make the partner activity, talk about your favorite thing to do, or, I mean, just something super simple, depending on the group that we're with. And then we move into our cafe questions. And as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 questions generally with each cafe that sort of build on each other. So I'm going to put you in a little bit bigger groups this time. And we're just going to talk about this question. What characteristics support a strong parent provider relationship? And provider, we're talking about that early care and education provider. We're going to move into our second question. So, if we were in a uh, physical environment, I would ask you to get up and move tables and mix yourselves up so that you don't have the same conversations with the same folks. But I'm going to see if Zoom will automatically mix you up. So we're going to give this a try. So the second question that I want you to think about, what strategies have you tried to meaningfully engage families? And I know that you all are working in many different capacities, but maybe think about a personal experience you've had if you're not working directly with families right now, or something that maybe that you've done in the past. And what would you consider successful and why? I do think it's important to talk about and think about the things that weren't so successful too, because we can all learn from those things. But I want you to focus on this for this round of discussion. All right, welcome back. We have one more question, and we're only going to spend just a few minutes in this, but I really want you to think about these hope building blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and put you in breakout rooms, and then I'm going to broadcast the question to you. I want you to think about those 4 hope building blocks that we talked about and learned about today: relationships, environment, engagement, and social and emotional development. And really think about ways that you've created opportunities for families to build on those, strengthen those, experience those, and how you could expand on them even further. So we're going to go into 3 breakout rooms for our last few minutes here, come back and harvest our discussion and wrap up. All right, so you've gotten a very brief taste of a cafe experience for anyone who hasn't participated in one before. So I want to just wrap up our time together with a brief reflection. Um, and if anybody's willing to come off mute or put in the chat box a response to any of these reflective questions. So, how did you feel getting to hear about the experience of other participants that you were able to talk to during your sessions? Or if you would like to share how it felt for you to get to share your own experiences and stories. So I will wrap up with our last bit here. I know if this is here's my contact information, by the way, if you want to find me for any reason or have questions about anything that I've talked about. So with that, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and I will wish you well for your weekend. Thank you.